Hello and welcome to another video. In this video we're going over some Ruffian Scoundrel. I show my stats here in the beginning, so if you guys want to go back and watch that, feel free. Basically running 589 crit, and then I'm also running high alacrity, 5431. Obviously if you want to have like better chance not have any like as GCD buffers, sometimes you can have 1.4 with this instead of always 1.3. You might want to go a little bit more alacrity, but this is the breakpoint where majority of your global cooldowns are 1.3. I don't want to get into that whole topic because really it's only at the point that you hit majority of your GCDs being 1.3 or 1.4 or whatever threshold you're trying to hit. Is it actually considered a quote-unquote breakpoint? Unfortunately, alacrity still doesn't work completely correctly, so not every point is valued equally. Anyway, getting into the match, we are really just trying to get dots on everybody because most of our damage is going to come from dots, and usually most of your damage is from dots anyway on lethality or as Ruffian. So the main thing that I'm thinking about here is that if there's a melee, I want to go to the range player and I want to hit the range player and have the melee player come stand on me. That means I can basically hit two people at the same time. Unfortunately, there was like nobody on this side, so I completely abandoned it afterwards, realizing there was nobody there. It kind of sucks. And then this guy throws diversion, so I don't want him to waste his diversion, so I try to help him a little bit here. But overall, he probably didn't need help. He didn't even bother to try to get out of diversion. And in this situation, you see that there's a decent amount of cleave here. So what I'm thinking about is I get my dots off. I got one dot on one person, dot on another person, and then I went for spread. And then corrosive grenade has to be applied like manually AoE. So if you can get it in like AoE situation, get it on multiple players. However, you're usually going to have to apply it manually. Corrosive dart and toxic blast or sanguinary shot, I believe it's on Ruffian. That ability, that should be a fatal shot too, can be spread by your toxic haze, which is bushwhack. Then when it comes to like damage outside of doing those dot spreads and obviously getting those dots in everybody, if you have toxic blasts on the main target or sanguinary shot, probably completely butchering that word, then you want to start using coal, and then obviously use shiv on cooldown to build your cool, basically your tactical advantage to use cool. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the Republic names, but I can't think of them. But basically they're my 2 and 3. You can probably recognize them as vital abilities for your rotation. But basically the ideal is that yes, you can use all your TAs, but you want to make sure you only use your last TA if you've got the proc, either if you're taking the passive or you have the NA proc that you already have built into the spec. Both of them do stack, so you can get 2 free, I think it's brutal shots, I think that's what it's called, or corrosive assault. And then when it comes to like, oh, what's the priority for like, do I use my blaster whip, that's what it's called, use my blaster whip or my shiv on cooldown? Not necessarily. There's also a buff I believe that increases the damage of corrosive assault and brutal shots. So there are some times that obviously you do want to be using it, but at the same time dots should be priority. And then when it comes to doing single target damage to somebody, you want to make sure that you have all 3 dots on them. Because then your brutal shots will do more, and then on top of that, when you do get the damage bonus for brutal shots from using shiv slash blaster whip, the value of it will just be way more. Typically just think about always trying to do something and don't waste too many globals. So even if you can't hit somebody, you can heal yourself, you can cleanse yourself, you can roll heal. There's a lot of things that you actually have access to that most classes just don't. When it comes to pruning, this class didn't really get pruned that much, so things like going high alacrity just gives you a chance to maximize a lot more than most other classes. This is probably one of the better classes that can actually make use of all the extra alacrity, because you also get alacrity for your stim boost when you pop it. And one way to think of this is like when you start a match, let's say you immediately get into an AoE situation, obviously you're going to pop your stim boost, and then you're going to go and say, hey, well, obviously you're going to do dot spread, then you're going to haze into backblast or lethal strike, right? And then you're going to reset. And if you pay attention to your stim boost, right before your stim boost falls off, you should reactivate the new stim boost, so it can also get the benefit of having a reduced cooldown. So when you initially pop your stim boost, you won't get the extra alacrity bonus from having stim boost for that reduced cooldown, but on the second one you will. So you'll be able to get your basically third stim boost even faster. And every time you have your reset, you'll be able to do that, and that's something that you can kind of like min-max, especially in the opener. It'll allow you not only be relatively tanky and heal a lot in the opener, it's just in general a good practice, especially if you make use of it by drawing aggro to yourself. You'll be able to tank a lot of damage pretty much freely. And then if you want to tie that in with a Zorb, which is the button I have on X, this will give you 15% DR for 6 seconds after it collapses. I also take the 5% heal tied to it. You can take the evasion on self out, but personally I just don't care for that. I like the 5% heal. 5% heal is a decent amount of your health, and it all adds up, especially when you're healing yourself with probes and roll heal. Part of the reason why lethality works the way it does, it's not necessarily that it has like crazy single target damage or anything like that. It's just the fact that it has a lot of damage reduction, and it has evasion. Evasion is really busted. And then it has passive healing tied to its DR too. So that means you can effectively make more use out of the damage reduction that you have access to. Most of the damage reduction that it has access to is on average higher than most of the damage reduction on other classes. So it is definitely a little bit higher on a totem pole when it comes to damage reduction, but also at the same time it has way better healing than most classes in the game. And including that, it can also off heal and cleanse and purge with evasion, which is super good. And then you also get cooldown reduction on evasion, and then if you're playing lethality you get an extra second on evasion, and then if you take the talent that I'm taking you get an extra 2 seconds on evasion, so that means you have 7 seconds of evasion. There's a lot to probably take in, but this class is just obnoxious, so running it on high alacrity is not a terrible ideal. Like in general, obviously you probably want to go more critical than what I'm running, but and like it doesn't matter too much. So like the difference of running like an actual build on lethality and running high alacrity in this situation is that I have way more kill pressure. Like my damage is going to be a lot more, so when it comes to like bonus damage and stuff like that, it's going to be relatively similar. But when it comes to actually just like critting and critting harder, having proper gear and having more critical in general will mean more damage. Because if you think about it, let's just say you're playing an arena, right? And you're dotting at least 3 or 4 players with all 3 dots. You're hitting maybe 300 hits or more throughout the entire arena. Having like 20% more damage is going to be a massive thing, especially when let's say you only crit like 50% more of the time. That stuff starts adding up like really fast. So it's not necessarily a great ideal to trade that for just hitting 20 more times. So it is something to definitely think about, but also at the end of the day, pretty much anything can kind of work, especially in a regular like PvP. Arena is a little bit different, but for the most part it's pretty good in arena too. But I would say you probably want definitely more lethal damage rather than like spongy kind of damage. And there's definitely one thing that I can point out here is that most of my sustained damage is lacking. Most of my windows where I'm doing a lot of sustained damage in general is only because I have the buff from Shiv, or I guess Blaster Whip. And I also get an unfortunate turn of events here. Had my roll activated just slightly earlier because I did have it. It just came off cooldown at the perfect time. It just didn't register immediately. I'm not sure what that was. Maybe a latency issue or just desync with the other person that was about to get it anyway. I probably could have got that and probably could have lived, but oh well, there's not much I can do about that. Another thing to think about too is, like, you know, for, like, let's say you're under geared as lethality, I would especially not even consider this because you're missing a lot of mastery, you're missing a lot of power. Part of the reason why this is even working is because I have so much mastery and I have so much power that I'm running Devastating Vengeance just to recoup some of the critical that I'm losing. And I'm also taking critical passives to help with the critical loss. But it does mean that I'm still like 50% crit multiplier, so that means my crits aren't very strong. Like, they're not hitting for very much. So if I crit, it doesn't really matter too much. But I would say ultimately, this is fun, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it is definitely something that spices things up. I really wish that we could run high alacrity more often. Our stat budget just doesn't allow it, and for the most part, maybe coming into next expansion we get like a stat squish and a level squish. I don't really like the idea of having a level 85 levels. That sounds terrible. And I can't imagine somebody else would want to do that, let alone like have to go through the hassle of like trying to learn stats. And then like there's so many ways to mess up your stats at the moment, and if we had just less stats to work with, it'd be much more easy to kind of like deal with. But it would be also nice to have enough stats, even if we have less stats, if we have enough stats to have some build diversity, that'd be great. High alacrity is definitely a very enjoyable way to play the game, but I totally understand if they want to stray away from that, because it does bring more lag to the game in general, because if people are hitting more APM, obviously APM is currently one of the biggest issues when it comes to lag. So when you're in a 16-man instance and everybody's doing optimal APM, so like let's say the start of a 16-man PvP match, so obviously 8 versus 8, they're all in the same spot, all fighting. If everybody's doing their opener, that's so many buttons happening all at once, and on top of that you have buffs, debuffs, animations, all that stuff. You get massive lag, your frames will drop to like 5, it's super bad. And if they can do even more, it's going to be even worse. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you guys again soon.